Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this series. Now, we introduced the science of fiqh and also the stages, a summary or the outline of the 4 stages. And now we'll get into the first stage of the development or the history of fiqh. The era started with the prophethood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the age of 40 in Ghar Hira. And it ended with the passing away of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Since the beginning of humanity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent prophets, Anbiya alayhim salam. Even the first man, Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam, was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not leave mankind without a sharia, without a way of life, without orders and a structure to live their lives. And because the accusation then can be made that we are not being given anything, and people claim that there's nothing descending from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is an accusation, a false accusation being made against Allah. It's an ultimate betrayal because it is against it's a disregard and ungratefulness for the rahmah, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the kindness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the wisdom and the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The stages in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam can divide in 2 stages: the Makkah period and the Medina period. The Makkah period, it didn't have a lot of rulings, but to say that there is no rulings in it is not correct. Actually, the main focus in Makkah Mukarramah was on usul-ud-din, or the fundamentals of deen, it was countering shirk, it was countering false ideas. And so it established the fundamentals or the aqidah or the basic fundamental beliefs of Islam. But to say that there was no rulings in Makkah is not correct. Right from the beginning of Islam, there were rulings related, especially like, for example, halal, food, saying Bismillah, or anything that you slaughter is right there from the beginning of Islam. In the Medina period, usul-ud-din or the teaching of usul-ud-din continued, and it was further detailed out. But the main feature of Medina period, when you look at it in terms of fiqh, the focus was on the rulings being established. And as one of the ulama said, that the orders of Allah rained down, like drops of rain, rained down in Madinah Munawwarah in such abundance. There were so rulings compared to the rulings that were revealed in Makkah Mukarramah. What are the sources of Sharia in this era? The source of Sharia in this era are 2, the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran being the book of Allah revealed on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Sunnah, the sayings, the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what happens to things, as in fiqh, we know about qiyas, ijtihad, qiyas being analogy. When you look at something similar, you derive a ruling which resembles a ruling in the Quran which doesn't exist in the Quran or the Sunnah. Or ijtihad, independent reasoning of a mujtahid, of a scholar. Where does that fit in? So in this stage, and this come back to, there's a fundamental question in usul of fiqh. Did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam pass any rulings based on his independent reasoning, or was everything that he said was wahi, revelation? There is a difference among the scholars. Some scholars of the view that everything the Prophet ﷺ judged upon was wahi, revelation. Others of the view that some things that he himself gave fatwa on, meaning he followed a system and derived a ruling. However, both of them agree that whatever the method was that he arrived ruling, whether it was directly wahi or that he had independent reasoning, which was approved by Allah, because if there was any thing not pleasing, na'uzubillah, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have corrected the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But so in either case, both groups of scholars agree that this still comes under the category of sunnah, which is the feature of this stage of the Prophet ﷺ, the foundation of the tashri', of the law. Remember, there's only one stage of establishing tashri'. There's other stages will come later on, but they still have to source themselves, link themselves to this stage. There is no second stage of tashri'. Tashri' or establishing sharia is only with the Prophet ﷺ and the revelation that came from the Prophet ﷺ. Anything that came afterwards, for example, the fatwa, the qawl al-sahabi, or the saying of Sahaba, or the fatawa al-sahaba, or the fatwas of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, is this tashri'? Is this part of the founding of Sharia? No, it is not. It is their ijtihad, their independent reasoning, which is based on the Quran, which is better than anybody else that came afterwards, because they had a much more deeper understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah. So it cannot be called the era of Tashri'ah. And this is something important to understand about dalils or proofs in Islam. So the ulama have classified proofs or dalils, meaning the sources where we derive our laws from, of two types. First is those that produce the rulings themselves, which is only the Quran and Sunnah. And then you have other rulings which are in principle based on what is in the Quran and Sunnah, and based in the Quran and the teachings of Rasul, based on the orders of Allah. Those dalils are also proof, but they're not at the level of the Quran and Sunnah. In the sense of ijma', consensus of the ummah, or qiyas, analogy, or fatwa of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, there's many others. These all are founded in the Quran and Sunnah itself. The system of fiqh, of deriving rulings, dalils, they're also dalils, but the clear proof is always what is come from the Quran and the Sunnah directly. So because they are law directly, while those that are proofs or systems or tools that are developed based on the Quran and Sunnah by the Imams afterwards, they don't establish the Sharia. They make the laws apparent. The laws are already there, but they bring it to the fore. As a simple example, if someone takes a certain intoxicant or a drug of this time, whatever the name of the drug is, you will not find that drug mentioned in the Quran and Hadith. How are you going to establish that that is haram? Right? We know that drugs that intoxicate are haram. Every Muslim knows that. But how can you say this is haram when this drug itself, by its name and by its nature, is not mentioned? Because it's not the same as wine, and its effects are not the same as wine. But it overall matches intoxication, which changes the person's mind at their detriment, where they cannot distinguish in right and wrong and good and bad and so forth. So how would you do that? How would you actually establish? So those qiyas, which the Prophet ﷺ taught. So he taught us actually methods of deriving rulings based on to look for the underlying reason. So the ulama took that and polished it into a system that we could better understand. Right? They took what Rasulullah ﷺ said, and then they put it out in a formal format for the ummah, which is in fiqh, usulul fiqh and so forth. So in that way, rulings were derived based on qiyas, where the thing doesn't exist in the Quran and Sunnah directly. Right? You'll have to use some sort of tool to arrive, a juristic tool to actually arrive at that ruling. You'll have to take the Quran Sunnah and there's a difference there. Qiyas is there, help you. That ruling for that thing exists in the Quran and Sunnah. For the intoxication, it exists in the Quran and Sunnah, but you can't see it. And qiyas, as an example, analogy, where you look at something that's similar, the fuqaha polished it into a system and into a structure that we can actually derive a ruling. But the ruling for that exists, but it's not apparent. So you can't. The ruling was not made for this. The ruling was not made by the ulama. They didn't make a sharia for this. And till Qiyamah, no group of ulama can sit down and imagine all the ulama gather and say, well, this is now halal, right? Something that is forbidden in the sharia, and they pass a law that this is now halal. They can't do this. No one's allowed. No one's permitted to do this. And the reverse also, something which is halal, and they make up a law and they say now this is haram, because this stage, the state of tashri', establishing the law, is only specific to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quran and Sunnah, the laws of the Quran and Sunnah are established in three ways. Firstly, a question was asked and then an answer came in the Quran or in the Sunnah. Secondly, a certain incident occurs. A battle occurred, or someone passed away, or an inheritance issue. Something happened, some external incident happened, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a law in the Quran, or Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained the law. The third one is where there was neither a external reason nor a question was asked, but from the side of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala order was revealed, or from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam an order was made. So it's not related to any specific incident or question, but it is directly from Allah and His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The specifics of this stage, firstly, is it is the establishment of the Sharia, as I mentioned earlier. It is also there's minimal ikhtilaf in this stage. It doesn't mean that there was no ikhtilaf. Sahaba radiallahu anhu given an order, the famous incident of Banu Qurayza, where the Sahaba radiallahu anhu went, they were told, don't pray your salat until you, don't pray salat al-asr until you reach Banu Qurayza. One group of Sahaba understood that as to be, to hasten, to go quickly. And we'll pray asr on the way, but this was not a command for literally praying salat when we get there, but it was just, you have to move, and because they had to fight a battle or lay a siege. And the other group of Sahaba understood as literally that we have to go and pray our salat at that place. So they differed and they prayed in two different places. So there's difference in the curve, but their differences, the difference between this stage and every stage afterwards, they could come back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then it became part of the Sunnah where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam they would give their report. This happened in many battles and incidents where they would ask him, and then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam he would provide the solution or the answer. So the ikhtilaf, the differences in this stage were minimal because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was alive and they could go to him. Also in this stage, the ahkam, the rulings, which is specific to this era or this stage of the development of fiqh, is that the orders came gradually, meaning multiple different orders came in gradual. They didn't all come at one go. So salat and jihad and forbidding of alcohol, intoxications, and so forth. The other thing is that certain ahkam, individual hukam, regarding one matter, it came, like jihad came in stages, forbidding of intoxications or alcohol, it came in stages. It didn't come in one go. Initially, alcohol was allowed to be drunk, but it was forbidden to come to salat. Then eventually, in the end, alcohol was totally forbidden. One thing to keep in mind is you can't use this stage you can't replicate. Meaning, someone becomes a Muslim and say, well, look, see, Sahaba radiallahu anhu, they became Muslim. The early Muslims, alcohol wasn't forbidden for them for another 14, 15 years. All right? So you can't say, oh, he's a new Muslim who drinks. Then for 15 years he's allowed to drink. Right? You can't make the Sharia is done. It's settled. However, what you can do is looking at the situation of the person, and you can see, all right, prioritize matters and have a look at the person that, look, if I start giving all the ahkam to this person in one go, the first thing is, let's say somebody comes to accept Islam, and it's a lady, and she said she's married, and you say to her, well, you can't be a Muslim and be married to a non-Muslim. Right? So it would not be wise to do that on the first go. Let her say the kalima. Let her say the shahada. And then, yes, to live in a relationship for a lady, to live in a relationship married to a non-Muslim, even if it's from the Ahl Kitab, is a sin. And it's a major sin, and zina and so forth. And it's serious. But her not being a Muslim is worse. So at least she's saved from eternal damnation in Jahannam. She goes to Jahannam forever. So some hikmah has, but you can't apply that and say, well, our masjid committee has made a sharia for new Muslims or non-practicing Muslims, and this week we will, say shahada to them. No, you don't have to pray. And some Muslims think like this. A brother became Muslim, and they said, well, the first Ramadan came like a month after he became Muslim, and they said to him, you don't have to fast. You can't do things like that. He asked, he goes, I have to fast. He said, no, you're a new Muslim, you don't have to fast. No, he has to fast. It's fard on him. So if they're asking, you have to, and you can't hide ahkam, especially fard acts. But you have to look at the situation. But this is more about conveying the deen or tabligh of deen or teaching. Some hikmah has to be used. But you can't change the sharia. You can't change the laws of Allah subhanahu. You look at the situation. If this person is just going to turn around and walk out of the mosque and never say shahada because you just put an obstacle there, then it's not about permitting that thing. It's not about saying, but have a look at the situation, because this person might walk out of the mosque totally with no Islam. So therefore, person better at least they become Muslim, say shahada, and then inshallah, hopefully, as great time goes. But you can't decide what the sharia is. You can't decide for them what sharia is. You might not mention something, but you cannot establish. Then he said, well, all right, we'll make a reverts course in 1 month. They just talk about the kalima. We don't teach them about salat. No, the Rasulullah ﷺ, when he sent people to, the first thing he said, give them shahada, la ilaha illallah. If they do that, accept that, then teach them salat. Right? And if they do that, then fasting and zakat and so forth, the fundamentals of deen. The fourth specific of this era, specific of this era is that's something that is specific this era, is a training of Sahaba radiallahu anhum as mujtahids, as muftis. Right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he trained certain Sahaba to issue fatwa, and they issue fatwa in his lifetime, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are the four specifics of this era. Now on the next slide, is the era of the pre-mazhab, meaning between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the four madahib or the other madahib, the era of the madhabs being established. This is the era pre-madhabs. So this is the era of Sahaba radiallahu anhum and the Tabi'een. The era of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, I just explained that Sahaba, and I will go through that detail in the next session as well. And then there's the era of the Tabi'een. These two eras define the era before the established schools that we know of that exist till now. There's an era in between where there's actually schools of Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Sahaba established their own schools, the Tabi'een established schools, and we'll go through those eras inshaAllah. Some of the Sahaba who were trained and they issued fatwa in the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the ulama have counted 14, such as Abu Bakr, Umar, Usman, Ali radiallahu anhu, Abdurrahman bin Auf, Muaz ibn Jabal, Aamir ibn Yasir, Hudayfa radiallahu anhu, Zayd ibn Thabit, Abu Darda, Abu Musa, Ubay bin Ka'b, Ubadah ibn Samit, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. All of these 14 Sahaba, they gave fatwa or issued fatwa in the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you look at some books of hadith and so forth, you'll notice that the Imams, when they ask questions, he said, I asked the people knowledge of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Meaning that among the Sahaba, there were certain Sahaba that were known for their knowledge and teaching and so forth. So they were the ulama of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. And that, or I asked the jurists of the Ansar, the fuqaha of the Ansar, the ulama and the muftis of the Ansar. So we know that in the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were muftis and ulama and mujtahids among the Sahaba, or they were apparently known as muftis and ulama among the Sahaba. And their existence, and also in the generation of Tabi'een, themselves noted that certain Sahaba were specifically set for qada, judgment, and also for issuing fatwas. Were they all mujtahids? That's a question that's asked. Were all the Sahaba mujtahids? So what the ulama have said, that all Sahaba radiallahu anhum had the power, the quwwat, the ability to do ijtihad. They could directly derive rulings from the sources, the Quran, Sunnah. However, it only appeared from some. So all of them have the ability and the thing, but very few expressed it. So we can only know the ones who've expressed it. But all Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they were selected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to understand the deen deeply. But there are only a limited number that we know that actually they issued fatwa and sat for judgment for courts and so forth. So if you look at in the second slide, that there's an era of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and Tabi'een, or the era that is before the established madahib, where he had systematic schools being established of fiqh. So this is the era of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the Tabi'een, and then the sources for this is the primary sources, which are from the Musannaf Abdul Razzaq as examples, Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba, and Al-Awsat of Ibn Mundhir, rahimahullah. And the secondary sources are books such as Al-Mughni of Imam Qudamah. These much later books which recorded the sayings from various sources, but these are secondary sources. But they're much more widespread because they're organized into the abwab of fiqh, the chapters of fiqh and so forth. As for the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, there's recorded by Ibn Hazm rahimahullah and requoted by Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah in his book, 130 Sahaba in total used to issue fatwas or sat for court judgments, and they've been recorded in big books. Out of more than 100,000 Sahaba, 130 whose fatwa have been recorded, and they were known to give fatwa. Among them, some were more prolific, some were less prolific, and some were intermediate. As for the one who were the most prolific, There were seven. Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, Aisha, Zayd, Ibn Abbas, and Ibn Umar radiallahu anhum. These are the ones, these seven were known to, and each one of them, if you compile the fatwa from all the books and sources, each one will be approximately a volume, quite a thick volume of their collection of their fatwa. If you look at the intermediate level, you'll have Sahaba, like you can probably compile each one of their one into a chapter, a big chapter of a book. They were like Abu Bakr, Uthman, Sa'ad, Salama, Anas, Abu Sa'id, Abu Huraira, Abdullah bin Amr ibn Zubayr, Abu Musa, Jabir, Muaz, and Salman radiallahu anhum. So there's 13 of them. So these 13 were intermediate. Their fatwa, in terms of number that have been recorded, they're in the intermediate category. And the few are Ubay bin Ka'b, Abu Ayyub, Abu Darda, Hassan and Hussein, Asma, Zayd ibn al-Arqam, Thawban, Burayda, radiallahu anhum. And they're the rest of the number. And you can only, all of their fatwa, if you add together, probably is one chapter of this last category. There's so few fatwa that they gave. Out of the all the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, the one who had the most depth in his knowledge and understanding was Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. This is the agreement of all the ulama. The greatest faqih after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from this ummah, the greatest faqih is Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And then after him was Umar radiallahu anhu. This is ijma' on this. However, his khilafah was only 2 years and 3 months, and most of that time was spent in dealing with murtads and so forth, the Ridda wars and so forth, and trying to reconcile and trying to regain back lost lands and so forth. And those people have left Islam. So there's not many fatwa of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. However, Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, more 10 years and 6 months of khilafah, many judgments, many rulings and fatwas are narrated from him radiallahu anhu. Also Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, because he came so late after he's the last of the four, so he has had a lot of fatwa were issued by him. Also Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he had an established school, meaning that he had followers who followed his system and copied and imitated, and he had students from the tabi'een and so forth who used to take his system and issue, like they followed a certain system, the system of Abdullah Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. Among the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, there were actually 3 Sahaba that had established schools. One is Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, one is Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu, one is Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu. Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu is Madinah Muwarrah. Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu was in Makkah and in Ta'if. And Sayyidina Abdullah Mas'ud radiallahu anhu was in Kufa in Iraq. These 3 among the Sahaba radiallahu anhu were known to establish schools, and they taught according to a certain methodology, and they trained students and ulama based on the system, and they did arrive to different conclusions. So this is a overview of the era of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also the era of Sahaba radiallahu anhu. InshaAllah, the era of Sahaba radiallahu anhu, next session we'll go into more detail, and then of the tabi'een as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding and tawfiq to practice what we say in here. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.